Hello. I'm Mr. Somber. Tonight, I have some stories to share with you, true accounts of those who've seen things they can't explain. Before we begin, make sure to like, subscribe, and tell me where you're listening from, city or country. Now, settle in. Turn off the lights. And let the shadows speak. The man in the hallway. I've always loved living in small mountain towns. There's something peaceful about being tucked away in the woods, where no one's rushing anywhere and the nights are truly dark. Not just less light, I mean dark. No street lamps. No passing cars. Just black trees, silence, and sky. After my divorce, I moved into a cabin outside Nederland, Colorado. It was older, built in the 70s, but solid. 2 bedrooms, a long hallway, and a wraparound porch that overlooked the pine forest. It felt like the kind of place where I could finally breathe again. For the first month, it was perfect. I spent the evenings drinking tea on the porch, journaling, sometimes even sketching. The nights were quiet, and I liked it that way. But then I started noticing the hallway closet door. At first, I didn't think much of it. It would be slightly ajar some mornings, even though I always closed it the night before. I assumed it wasn't latching properly. It's an old house, after all. But one night, I was lying in bed reading, and I heard it open. Just once. No wind. No vibration from movement. Just the slow groan of wood moving against wood. I got up, checked, and sure enough, it was open. I closed it again, this time making sure it clicked shut, and went back to bed. The next night, same thing. Around 2:30 a.m., the door creaked open again. I hadn't even fallen asleep yet, so I knew I wasn't dreaming it. I walked out, closed it again, a little harder this time. I started sleeping with the bedroom door closed after that. The nights felt different. It wasn't just the sound, I started waking up at the exact same time every night, 2:33 a.m. No alarm. No external noise. I would just wake up, heart racing, like I was being watched. On the third night, I left a chair in front of the hallway closet door. Just a simple wooden chair from the dining room, wedged right up against the frame. I figured if it moved, I'd hear it. Or at least see that it had been disturbed. That night, I had trouble falling asleep. I left a light on in the kitchen just to give myself a little glow under the door. It made me feel better. At exactly 2:33, I woke up again. I didn't hear the door this time. I didn't hear anything. But I felt something. Like the air had gone still. Pressurized. My ears were ringing slightly, and there was this distant thudding sound, like a heartbeat, but not mine. I got up slowly and opened my bedroom door. The hallway was empty. The chair was still there, right in front of the closet. But something felt wrong. The kitchen light I had left on was off. I stood in the hallway, unsure of what to do, when I heard a whisper. It wasn't clear. Just a breath of sound. I turned on the hallway light. Nothing. The next morning, the kitchen light worked fine again. I told my friend Jess about it over coffee the next day. She's lived in Boulder for years and dabbles in weird folklore stuff. I thought maybe she'd get a kick out of it. She didn't laugh. Instead, she said something that stuck with me. Some houses remember things. Especially old ones. I started recording my nights after that. I had an old phone, so I set it up outside my bedroom door with a voice recorder app running. I figured I'd catch some creaks and groans, maybe put my own mind at ease. The first night, I got 4 hours of silence. Then at 2:33 a.m., it caught something. First, a soft shifting sound. Like cloth brushing against wood. Then, clear as day, 3 slow footsteps. I rewound the recording so many times. It wasn't random noise. It was someone, or something, walking right outside my bedroom. Then came the voice. It was whispery, low, almost croaking. I couldn't make out what it said at first. I ran it through some audio cleanup software Jess recommended. Boosted the volume, filtered the bass. And then I heard it. She's watching us sleep. I didn't sleep for 2 nights after that. I started keeping the lights on. All of them. Kitchen, living room, bathroom. I left music playing quietly in the background, old jazz, classical, anything to make it feel less dead. But on the 4th night, the power went out. No storm. No wind. Just a click around 2:15 a.m., and the whole house went dark. I was already awake, lying in bed with my phone in my hand, so I turned on the flashlight and listened. Nothing. Then I heard the hallway floorboards creak. Once. Then again. Then silence. I called out, "Who's there?" Knowing how stupid it sounded. But it was instinct. And when I said it, the creaking stopped. It didn't start again. But I knew someone was still there. I could feel the weight of attention. Like being stared at from behind thick glass. I didn't get out of bed. I just waited. And eventually, the light came back on. 2 days later, I had a locksmith come and check the closet door. I told him it wouldn't latch properly. He checked it, fixed a screw, and told me it was good as new. That night, it opened again. And this time, the chair I had placed in front of it, was neatly pushed aside. Not knocked over. Not in the middle of the hallway. Just, moved. Like someone had gently stepped out and put it back. I lasted another week before I broke the lease. Told the landlord I had to leave for family reasons. I packed up everything in one day and drove to my sister's place in Arizona. But here's the part one don't tell most people. Last week, I was going through a box I never unpacked, mostly junk from my desk, and found my old phone. The one I'd used to record the hallway sounds. There were 8 recordings on it. I'd only ever listened to the first one. So, I played the second. The third. The fourth. Every one of them had the same whisper, always around the same time. She's watching us sleep. But in the very last one, recorded the night before I left, the voice said something different. She's in here with me now. That house is empty again. Or maybe not. I haven't checked. But if you ever find yourself alone in an old mountain home, listen for the hallway door. And if it creaks open around 2:30 a.m., don't get up. Just wait. And pray it's not your turn yet. The house behind the orchard. I grew up in southern Oregon, in a town that doesn't really exist on most maps. It's the kind of place where everyone knows each other's business, and if something strange happens, it usually stays quiet. When I was 12, my family rented a property on the outskirts of town, a 1-story ranch house surrounded by pear orchards. It was beautiful in the fall. Golden leaves, mist in the morning, and rows of trees stretching out in every direction. But behind our house, beyond the orchard, there was another building. Small, square, and rotting into the ground. We were told not to go near it. My dad said it was just an old storage building, probably full of rats or black mold. My mom never spoke about it at all. But my brother and I, well, we were kids. The fact that it was forbidden made it magnetic. The first time we approached it, we didn't even get close. There was this smell. Not rotting food. Not garbage. Just wrong. Like something old that had been buried too long was waking up. The air felt colder there, even though it was the middle of September. That same night, I had my first dream about the house. In the dream, I was standing in the orchard, facing the little structure. Only it wasn't rotting anymore, it looked clean, freshly painted, and the door was wide open. I walked toward it, and just before I reached the entrance, someone inside spoke. Not loudly. Not angrily. Just a flat voice that said, "You're not supposed to be here." I woke up with a nosebleed. I'd never had one before. Things got weirder after that. My younger brother, Nate, stopped sleeping in his room. Said he kept waking up to tapping on his window. We were surrounded by trees, so birds were always around, but this wasn't random. It was 3 taps, every time. Like someone knocking gently. On the 3rd night, my dad stormed into his room with a flashlight and opened the window. Nothing. No marks. No birds. But the screen was on the ground, torn at one corner. Then one morning, we woke up to find footprints in the dirt behind our house. Bare feet. Leading from the orchard to the back of the old building. My dad tried to laugh it off. "Some drifter," he said. But I saw his hands shaking when he picked up the hose. I started having the same dream again, but it changed each time. The voice stayed the same, but the message changed. "You were told not to come. She's listening. You're waking her up." I started to dread sleep. Not because I thought I'd die in my dream, but because each one felt more real than the last. I could feel the cold air, smell that wrong scent, hear the soft rasp of someone breathing just out of sight. Then came the night I sleepwalked. I woke up barefoot, standing in the orchard at 3:12 a.m. I don't remember walking out there. The door behind me was wide open. And the small building at the back of the property had its door open, too. There was someone standing in the doorway. Not walking. Not moving. Just watching me. I couldn't see their face. I didn't even know if it was a man or woman. But I felt this overwhelming sense of grief. Like something ancient was staring through me, mourning me. I don't remember getting back inside. But when I woke up, my feet were muddy and the bottoms were scratched up from twigs and rocks. We moved out a few months later. Not because of the building, officially. My dad got a new job offer. But even he didn't seem sad to leave. Years later, when I was in college, I drove past the old property just for fun. Curiosity, I guess. Everything looked the same, except for the little building. It was gone. Like it had never been there at all. I asked around. Some older neighbors remembered it, but no one seemed to know what happened to it. One woman said something strange, though. She told me the orchard land had once belonged to a midwife in the 1800s. Her house was burned down after a baby died during a birth that went wrong. Some believed she'd gone mad and buried the child near her home. Others said she was murdered and buried with the baby by the townspeople. I don't know if it's true. But sometimes I still dream about that building. And when I do, the door is always open. And someone inside is still waiting. The Whispering Girl. I grew up in a house that was older than any of us really understood. My mom inherited it from her aunt, a quiet, gray-bricked home tucked in the Appalachian foothills of Kentucky. It sat on the side of a steep hill, surrounded by woods so thick that you couldn't see the sun for more than a few hours each day. The house itself had character, crown molding, uneven hardwood floors, a fireplace with hand-carved mantels. But it also had other things. We started hearing the whispers the second week we moved in. At first, we blamed it on the wind. The house had those tall, narrow windows with warped glass panes. The kind that whistle in storms. So when we'd hear soft hissing at night, like voices too faint to understand, we assumed it was just the wind passing through old cracks. But the voices were always the same volume, and always the same time, between 2 o'clock and 3 a.m. I remember one night I was doing homework late, maybe 11:30 or so. I was in the upstairs hallway, trying to pick up the Wi-Fi signal from my mom's room, when I heard a voice behind me say, "Caleb, come downstairs." It was a girl's voice. Soft. Almost friendly. I turned around, nothing. I figured it was the TV, but my mom had gone to bed hours ago. So I went downstairs just to check. Everything was dark. No screens were on. The only sound was the ticking of the old grandfather clock in the living room. Then I looked at the mirror by the front door, and froze. There was a smudge in the center of the glass. Not a fingerprint or grease. It looked like the outline of a face pressed against it. A small face, like a child's. I wiped it with my sleeve, heart pounding. It didn't come off. I asked my mom if she knew anything about the house's history. She just shrugged. Told me her aunt had lived there for decades but never talked much. Said something vague like, old houses settle strangely. But this wasn't about settling. Over the next few weeks, the voice came back more often. Always at night. Sometimes whispering my name. Sometimes humming. One night, I woke up to the sound of footsteps in the hallway. Not heavy adult steps, light, like someone walking on tiptoes. I sat up in bed and listened. They paused outside my door. Then I heard a knock. 3 soft taps. I didn't answer. After a few seconds, a voice on the other side whispered, "I'm cold. Can I come in?" It was the same voice. Same girl. I pulled the covers over my head and just waited. Eventually, I must have fallen back asleep, because when I woke up, the door was slightly open. And the floor just inside had 2 wet footprints. Bare. Small. The next day I talked to our neighbor, an older woman named Doris who had lived on the hill her whole life. I asked if anything strange had ever happened in our house. Her face changed instantly. She got quiet. Looked at the woods behind my house and said, "That house remembers things." She told me a little girl had gone missing on the property back in the 1940s. 8 years old. They'd never found her body. Some people believed she wandered into the woods and fell into one of the old mine shafts scattered through the hills. Others weren't so sure. Apparently, the family who lived there at the time moved out the year after it happened. Left everything behind. And in the years since, every single person who moved in had eventually left. Fast. I wanted to prove to myself that this wasn't real. That I was dreaming. So I did something I regret. I left a recorder on in my room overnight. Just a cheap digital recorder from Walmart. I set it on the nightstand, hit record, and went to sleep. The next morning, I listened to the file. The first few hours were silence, just the hum of the fan, a few shifts in the blankets. But around 2:18 a.m., I heard my name. Caleb. Then soft laughter. Then breathing. So close to the mic that it distorted slightly. But the worst part was the last minute of the recording. It was the sound of someone standing next to the recorder. And then, in that same soft little girl voice. "I know you're listening." And then, click. The file stopped like someone had physically turned it off. I never hit stop. I never touched it. After that, things got more aggressive. Lights flickering. Doors closing on their own. My mom heard the voice once, swore she thought it was me calling for help. When she came running, she found my bedroom empty. I was downstairs. That same night, she found handprints on the inside of the living room window. Too small to be mine. Definitely not hers. The final night we spent in the house is still hard to talk about. I was asleep, or thought I was, when I felt someone crawling into bed next to me. I froze. I could feel the weight on the mattress. The covers shifting. Cold skin against my shoulder. Then a breath against my ear. You stayed too long. I jumped up. The bed was empty. But the sheets on the other side were still dented. That was it. We packed our things and left within 48 hours. Years later, I drove through Pikeville and past the hill where the house used to sit. It was gone. Not renovated. Not sold. Just gone. The hill was overgrown with weeds. No driveway. No mailbox. Like it had been erased. I pulled over, got out of the car, and just stared. And then, in the quiet, I heard it. A girl's voice, carried faintly on the wind. I miss you, Caleb. I got in the car and drove. And I haven't gone back since. The thing in apartment 3C. I used to live in a quiet brick apartment building on the edge of Milwaukee, one of those places where the halls always smell like dust and old radiator heat. Rent was cheap. It had charm. But it also had secrets. Apartment 3C had been empty the entire time I lived there. I never saw anyone go in or out. No sounds. No lights. Just this sense of stillness. My unit was 3B, directly across the hall. I used to joke with friends that I lived next to a ghost. It stopped being a joke in October. I was coming home late one night, maybe close to midnight. As I stepped off the elevator, I noticed something strange. The door to 3C was cracked open. Just a couple inches. Enough that I could see into the dark. It was the first time I'd ever seen that door open. I paused. Listened. No movement. No TV. Just silence. I figured maybe the landlord had finally rented it out and forgot to close it all the way. I didn't touch it. I just went into my place, locked up, and went to bed. But around 3 a.m., I woke up to a noise in the hallway. It was the sound of something heavy being dragged across the floor. Long, slow scrapes. Then, nothing. Then it would start again. I stood by my peephole for 10 minutes, but the hallway was empty. Totally still. I tried to write it off, maybe someone was moving furniture late. But in the morning, the hallway runner rug outside my door was bunched and scuffed, like something had been pulled across it. And the door to 3C was closed again. A week went by with nothing strange. Then, one night while brushing my teeth, I heard tapping. It was faint, but clear. Not random. Rhythmic. I turned off the faucet and leaned closer to the wall. The tapping was coming from 3C, directly behind my bathroom mirror. 4 taps. Then a pause. Then 3. Like some sort of code. I knocked back. Once. Nothing happened. But later that night, as I was falling asleep, I heard something shift against my bedroom wall, like a body pressing against it from the other side. My entire headboard rattled. Then, whispering. No words I could understand. Just a low, frantic whisper, like someone praying fast and quiet. I asked the landlord the next day if someone had moved into 3C. He looked confused. Nope. Still vacant. Haven't touched it in months. I asked if I could look inside. He hesitated, then shrugged and unlocked it. I wish he hadn't. The inside of 3C looked abandoned. Layers of dust on the floor. No furniture. No trash. Nothing personal. Just a smell, dry rot and something sweet and sour, like old meat. There were also scratches. On the inside of the front door. Deep gouges in the wood, like someone had clawed at it from the inside. I asked the landlord about the scratches. He didn't answer. Just said, "I'll replace the door," and left. That night, I slept with earplugs. It didn't help. I woke up at 3:12 a.m., heart racing, with the feeling that something had just left my apartment. Not entered, left. I got up, checked the locks. Everything was secure. Then I looked through the peephole, and almost screamed. The door to 3C was open again. And standing inside was a shape. Not fully in the light. Just enough to make out a tall, hunched figure. Bare skin. No clothes. Pale, almost gray. Arms too long. No visible face, just a smooth shape where one should be. It didn't move. It didn't blink. It just stood there, watching my door. I backed away from the peephole and waited. I didn't look again. In the morning, the hallway was empty. 3C's door was closed. I told myself I'd imagined it. Until I saw the handprint. Pressed on the outside of my door. High up. Human-shaped, but with too many fingers. The next week was a blur of small things. My lights flickering. My microwave turning on at 3 a.m. sharp. Whispers in the shower. I'd leave the apartment and come home to find small items moved. Keys, toothbrush, my shoes facing the wrong way. Then, one night, I dreamed I was trapped in 3C. In the dream, I was sitting in the center of the room. No furniture. The walls were covered in mirrors, but none of them showed me. They showed different versions of 3C. One had a crib. One had chains on the wall. One was pitch black, except for two glowing eyes. When I woke up, my nose was bleeding. I finally did some digging online. Nothing official came up, but in a local forum I found a thread from 2009. A user asking if anyone remembered a girl who went missing from apartment 3C. 15 years old. Disappeared from a locked apartment. No signs of forced entry. Her family said she'd been acting strange, sleepwalking, whispering to herself, always standing by the mirror. No body was ever found. The thread ended with a comment that still chills me. They say she never left. They say 3C isn't empty, it's hungry. I moved out a month early. Paid the fee. Didn't care. On my last night there, I walked past 3C without looking at the door. But as I stepped into the elevator, I swear I heard it again. Come back. The voice was right beside me. I slammed the button. Didn't breathe until the doors closed. I live in a new building now. Top floor. No neighbors across the hall. But sometimes, when I'm falling asleep, I hear that same tapping. 4 knocks. Then 3. And I wonder how long it'll take for 3C to find me again. Beneath the reservoir. When I was 19, I worked a summer job with a small environmental survey crew in northern Utah. We spent most of our time hiking trails, taking water samples, and measuring land erosion in remote areas. It wasn't glamorous work, but I loved it, especially the solitude. That summer, we were assigned to a site near an old reservoir tucked deep in the Uintas. It wasn't on any public hiking maps and didn't even have a formal name, just a series of coordinates and a dirt road barely wide enough for our truck. The place was strange from the start. Still. Heavy. The kind of silence that isn't peaceful, but unnatural. No birds. No wind. Even the water felt off, too still, too dark. Our supervisor, Ron, said the reservoir had been created by flooding a small mining town back in the 1930s. The government had bought the land, told everyone to leave, and dammed the valley. All that was left now was the water and the shadows beneath it. The first thing I noticed was the smell. It wasn't overwhelming, just faint, like mildew or soil that had never seen sunlight. But it clung to the air near the shoreline, especially in the early morning. Ron told us it was probably runoff from the surrounding hills. But that didn't explain the oily sheen that floated on the surface some days, or the occasional patches of dead grass that seemed to appear overnight. On the fourth day, we set up camp a few hundred feet from the water's edge. That night, I woke up just past 2 a.m. to a sound I couldn't place. It wasn't an animal or wind. It was rhythmic. Wet. Like something sloshing slowly, back and forth. I unzipped my tent and looked out. The water was calm, but I saw something wrong. A figure standing waist deep in the middle of the reservoir. No flashlight. No gear. Just standing there, arms at its sides. I blinked, thinking it might be one of the crew, maybe Ron taking a swim or doing something stupid. But when I turned to check the other tents, I saw his light was still on. He was awake, sitting in the doorway, staring at the same figure. Neither of us said anything. Just watched it slowly sink into the water without a ripple. It was gone in seconds. The next day, Ron didn't mention it. Neither did I. But the mood had shifted. The trees felt closer. The air felt heavy. We moved slower, and everyone spoke more quietly, like we were trying not to wake something up. I started noticing patterns in the mud near the shoreline, small circular impressions, not like any animal I knew. Perfectly round, about the size of my palm, as if someone had pressed a cup into the earth. They formed strange spirals. Lines. Shapes that made me dizzy to look at too long. I took photos. Sent one to a friend back in Salt Lake who studied geology. He replied a day later with a short message. These aren't natural. That same night, our water jugs went missing. We'd left them sealed beside the truck. In the morning, they were gone. Not dragged off, just gone. No prints. No signs of animals. No tire tracks. We thought it might have been a prank, maybe someone messing with us. But the nearest town was over 30 miles away, and nobody knew we were there except our company. On the seventh night, it got worse. I woke up to the sound of whispering. Not outside. Not in another tent. Inside mine. It was quiet, like someone crouched beside my sleeping bag, breathing out words in a language I didn't understand. Soft syllables. Wet clicks. I froze. Tried to slow my breathing. Then I felt it. A hand, gently pressing against my chest. Cold. Webbed. It didn't push, it just rested there. Holding me in place. I don't know how long it stayed. Could have been seconds. Could have been hours. Eventually, the weight lifted. The whispering stopped. And when I dared open my eyes, the tent was empty. But the floor was wet. The next morning, Ron had already packed up his tent. He looked like he hadn't slept. Just said, "We're done. We're leaving today." No questions. We didn't argue. On the drive back, no one spoke. We just stared at the trees as they passed by, waiting to see something step between them. Weeks later, I got a call from Ron. He sounded hoarse. Said he'd gone back, alone. Something had been bothering him, like a thread he couldn't stop pulling. I found a hatch, he said. In the shallows. Like a door, metal, bolted to the rocks. I asked if he opened it. He didn't answer at first. Then, in the quietest voice I've ever heard from a grown man, he said. It wasn't locked. That was the last time I heard from him. I followed up with the company. They told me Ron had resigned and left no forwarding address. Just disappeared. I still dream about the reservoir. The water, the spirals, the figure standing still in the dark. And sometimes, just before I wake up, I hear a voice whispering from beneath the floorboards. We were here first. And I wake up cold. Wet. With the taste of algae in my mouth. The man in the back seat. I grew up in a small town in Montana. The kind of place where you know everyone's name and everyone's business, whether you want to or not. Quiet, mostly. Not much crime. Just snow in the winter and long, empty highways in every direction. I was 17 when it happened. I had just gotten my license, and that sense of freedom you get from a beat-up old car and a tank of gas felt endless. That night, I was driving back from a friend's house around 11:30, taking the back roads to avoid the state patrol. There's a stretch of highway just outside of town, Highway 49. It runs straight for miles with nothing but barbed wire fences and dark fields on either side. No houses. No lights. No cell signal. That's where I first saw the car. An old sedan, beat up, maybe from the 70s. It was parked on the shoulder, facing the opposite direction, lights off. As I passed it, my headlights lit up the inside just long enough to see that no one was in the driver's seat. At least, that's what I thought. A few minutes later, I glanced in the rearview mirror. And I saw headlights. Same car. Same shape. It was now behind me, following at a distance. I hadn't seen it pull out. There was no turnoff it could have come from. It was just, suddenly there. I told myself it was nothing. Probably someone broken down, then fixed their car and got back on the road. Coincidence. But when I turned onto the road leading into my neighborhood, a tight two-lane that wound through tall trees, the headlights turned with me. Still behind me. Still steady. I slowed down. So did the car. I sped up. So did the car. No swerving. No honking. Just quiet, steady pursuit. I pulled into my driveway fast and cut the engine. My house was dark, my parents were already asleep. I stayed in the car with my hands on the wheel, watching the mirror. The sedan didn't pull in behind me. Instead, it coasted past my house slowly. No brake lights. No sound. Just drifted past like a shadow sliding through the neighborhood. I waited until it disappeared. Then I ran inside, locked every door, and stood by the window with the lights off for almost an hour. It didn't come back. Not that night. The next morning, I told my mom. She said I probably imagined it, that it was late, and maybe I was tired. My dad offered to check the street camera on the corner pole. We had one of those little security cameras pointing at the road. We pulled up the footage. Watched as I pulled into the driveway. No car behind me. No lights. No sedan. Nothing at all. It was like I'd driven home alone. A few nights later, it escalated. I was heading back from a grocery run, this time just before 10. The sun had gone down, and the streets were empty. I turned off the highway onto my road. And there it was again. The same car. Parked further down the street this time, but unmistakable. Old, gray, dented on the driver's side door. No lights. No movement. I turned around and drove the long way back through town, heart pounding the whole time. I took side streets, alleyways, anything to shake the feeling that I was being watched. When I finally made it home, the driveway was empty. But that night, I couldn't sleep. Because at exactly 3:17 a.m., the motion light above our garage clicked on. I ran to the window. There was no car. But there was a figure standing in our front yard. Not moving. Just standing completely still at the edge of the grass, facing the house. I couldn't make out details, just the outline. Broad shoulders. Hands at the sides. A strange tilt to the head, like he was listening to something. And then he stepped backward, into the shadows. And disappeared. My dad checked the cameras again. And again, nothing. You could see me running to the window. You could see the light turn on. But the yard? Empty. Like whatever was out there didn't want to be seen by anything except my eyes. I started driving with people after that. Wouldn't go out alone. I even switched up my routes. But sometimes, I'd still feel it. That sense of being watched from behind. Like someone was crouched just out of sight behind my seat. Once, while parked at a red light, I felt something brush the back of my neck. I spun around, no one there. But the back seat was warm. Like someone had just been sitting in it. Then came the worst night. I had just gotten home from work, late shift. Around 1 a.m. I parked in the driveway, headlights off, just sitting for a second to breathe. And then I heard breathing behind me. Close. Inside the car. I didn't look. I couldn't. I just opened the door slowly, slipped out, and slammed it shut behind me. Ran to the porch, heart hammering. When I turned to look, my back seat was empty. But on the inside of the rear window, there was a single handprint. Too large to be mine. Too long. Like the fingers had stretched to touch more glass than should be possible. That car followed me for another week. Always at a distance. Never close enough to prove anything. Never close enough to catch. Until one night, it just stopped showing up. No more sightings. No breathing. No handprints. Just, gone. I sold my car a month later. It's been years since then. But sometimes, when I'm driving alone at night, I check my rearview mirror too often. I listen for breathing. I watch the edge of my headlights for movement. And I never, ever leave my doors unlocked. Because I've never stopped wondering if I was followed home. Or if I'm still being followed. Voices from the static. I used to work the overnight shift at a small AM radio station just outside Asheville, North Carolina. It was one of those backwoods, low-budget setups where most of our content was pre-recorded sermons, trucker call-ins, and local folk music. We barely got reception outside a 30-mile radius, but people still tuned in. A lot of older folks. Night drivers. People who liked the quiet. My job was mostly just to keep the equipment running, check the boards, and take the occasional live call during open hours, from midnight to 3 a.m. Those hours, they changed me. It started on a Wednesday. Dead quiet night. I was about an hour into my shift, sitting in the booth with coffee and static humming in the headphones. The lines had been quiet for the past half hour. Nothing unusual. Then line 2 lit up. I picked up. WQRC radio, I said. You're live. There was silence. No voice. Just faint crackling, like interference. And then, something underneath it. A voice. It wasn't clear. More like a whisper, distant, layered behind the static. I turned the gain up. That's when I heard it. "You're not supposed to be here." I paused. "Hello?" No answer. Just the same words. Over and over. "You're not supposed to be here." Then the line went dead. I figured it was a prank. We got those sometimes, kids calling in with weird noises or trying to scare the late-night guy. I let it go. But 2 nights later, the same thing happened. Line 2 again. I picked up. Nothing but static at first. Then the voice returned. "He sees you now." This time it was louder. Closer. Like someone standing just outside the booth, speaking through a thick pane of glass. Then I heard a click, and the feed from the hallway mic, which had been off, turned on by itself. I looked at the monitor. Nothing in the hallway. But the audio feed was active. Picking up breathing. The next morning, I told my station manager. She laughed it off. Said the old board sometimes shorted out, picked up stray signals from CB radios or even walkie-talkies from the highway patrol. Ghosts in the wires, she called it. But it didn't stop. A few nights later, I was broadcasting a live call from a trucker, friendly guy, talking about weather patterns down I-40, when the background audio changed. There was a faint reverb, like his voice was echoing from 2 sources. I asked, "You hearing that too?" He went quiet for a second. "I thought that was your line." Then the static cut in again. Heavy. Thick. Almost wet. And in the middle of it, clear as day, a new voice broke through. "Let him go." The trucker hung up. I stopped taking live calls after that. Switched to recorded content only. The manager didn't argue. By that point, the calls had dropped off anyway. Maybe people were getting spooked. Maybe the signal was warping. But the voices didn't stop. They just changed where they came from. One night around 2:45, I stepped into the hallway for a soda from the vending machine. When I came back into the booth, the on-air light was on. I hadn't touched the mic. The feed was broadcasting silence, except for the low hum of the station's backup generator. And under it, "You left the door open." I froze. Turned to the studio entrance. It was wide open. I always closed that door. Locked it, even. Habit. But now it stood open, like someone had just walked in. I shut everything down early that night. Didn't sleep when I got home. Things escalated fast after that. Lights flickering in perfect rhythm, like Morse code. Recordings going missing. My own voice being played back at random, repeating phrases I never said. And then, the dream started. Always the same, I'm in the booth, watching the waveform on the screen. But it's not registering my voice, it's drawing something else. A shape. Circular. Spinning slowly. And behind me, in the reflection of the glass, is a tall figure with no mouth. Just static where the lower half of its face should be. I started researching the history of the station. Found an old article buried in a library microfilm. Back in 1979, the original building burned down. Same frequency. Same call letters. One overnight host died in the fire. They never found his body, just his headset, melted into the chair. Some say he stayed on the air while the flames spread. Read the Bible. Took calls. Some say you can still hear his last words if you tune to 13:30 a.m. during a thunderstorm. I left the job a few weeks later. Moved 2 states away. Thought I could leave it behind. But every now and then, I scan the AM dial. And sometimes, in the dead space between stations, I hear a voice say my name. Not speak it, say it. Like a warning. Like a promise. And the static that follows doesn't sound like static anymore. It sounds like breathing. Snowfall Ridge. I spent the winter of 2019 working maintenance at a remote ski lodge in Colorado, Snowfall Ridge, up near the Wyoming border. It was one of those seasonal places, full of tourists in December, ghostly quiet by late January. By the time February rolled around, I was one of 3 people left on staff. There was Mara, the property manager, tough woman, mid-40s, no nonsense. Spent most of her time on the radio with corporate, handling supply runs. Then there was Tom, the night security guy. Retired firefighter. Nice enough, but didn't talk much. Then there was me. I was the all-purpose fix-it man. Leaky faucets, busted generators, patching holes in drywall, whatever needed doing. The job was fine. Cold, lonely, but the pay was good and the mountains were beautiful. Then the snow came. Not a storm. A shutdown. It started on February 8th, light flurries in the morning, then by afternoon it was coming down so hard you couldn't see past the tree line. Winds howled non-stop, clocking 60, 70 miles per hour. Roads were buried. Power lines snapped like twigs. We were stuck. The satellite internet went out the first night. Phone lines the next day. The backup generator held for a while, but the cold chewed through fuel faster than we'd anticipated. We were officially cut off. Mara kept us calm. She said they'd send a snowcat once things cleared. Said we just had to wait it out, maybe a few days. But the snow didn't stop. Not after 3 days. Not after 5. By day 9, we hadn't seen the sun once. Just endless white through the windows. Like we were trapped in a snow globe. That's when things started to change. Tom was the first to notice. He came to breakfast one morning, pale as the plates, hands shaking. Said he saw footprints outside. Bare feet. No shoes. No socks. Just human footprints, walking in a slow, perfect circle around the building. Mara and I went out to check, but by then, the wind had erased everything. Not a mark in the snow. We chalked it up to a dream, maybe a trick of the eye. Isolation does things to people. But that night, I started hearing sounds. Tapping. Against the window. Always the same pattern, 3 soft knocks. Then silence. I tried brushing it off, icicles shifting, snow falling from the roof, whatever. But it kept happening. Every night. Always at the same window. It was the window outside room 217. Now here's the thing, that room was supposed to be locked. We had closed it for renovations in early January. The ceiling had water damage, and nobody had been in there for weeks. But on the 12th night, I found the door open. Just slightly. Just enough to let the cold in. The light inside was flickering. And the mirror above the dresser had fog on it. Like breath. I called for Tom. He checked every inch. Nothing. No footprints. No broken locks. But we both felt it, this weight in the air. Like the room didn't want us there. We sealed it again. Bolted it shut. Next night, the door was open again. Mara stopped talking to us after that. She locked herself in the manager's office, said she wasn't feeling well. Her voice changed, got quieter. Like she was listening to something the rest of US couldn't hear. I passed by the office once, around 2 a.m., and saw her just sitting at the desk. In the dark. Staring at the wall. muttering something I couldn't make out. Tom and I started sleeping in shifts, too scared to be alone. He told me he kept hearing someone whispering from the ventilation ducts. Said it sounded like his brother, who'd been dead for 10 years. One morning, I woke up to find him gone. Not in his room. Not in the lounge. Just, gone. There was only one set of prints leading out the side door, heading straight into the snowstorm. Bare feet. I never saw him again. I tried the snowmobile, but the fuel lines were frozen. No power. No radios. And still, every night, the tapping. Always room 217. 3 knocks. Then silence. On the final night. I think it was the 17th or 18th, I snapped. Grabbed a fire axe. Went up to the room and kicked the door open. The light was on. The bed was made. And on the floor, were wet footprints. They circled the bed once. Stopped right in front of the mirror. That's when I saw her. Not in the room. In the reflection. A woman in a long nightgown, her skin gray and cracked from the cold. No eyes. Just black holes, like the sockets had been scooped out. Her mouth hung open like she was mid-scream. I turned to face the room, and it was empty. But when I looked back at the mirror, she was closer. Reaching out. I don't remember what happened after that. Just, darkness. And the sound of wind. When the rescue team finally arrived, day 21, they found me half frozen in the lounge, wrapped in blankets and muttering nonsense. Mara was gone. Room 217 had been ripped open from the inside. The glass in the mirror was shattered, but only on the inside of the frame. They found footprints, too. Bare ones. Dozens of them. All circling the lodge in perfect silence. I don't talk about it anymore. I've moved south. Never see snow if I can help it. But sometimes, on especially cold nights, I still hear it. 3 soft knocks at the window. And silence. The neighbor with no windows. I moved into the house on Brook Hollow Drive in early 2022. It was in a quiet, tree-lined suburb just outside Eugene, Oregon, peaceful, safe, the kind of place where people waved at you even if they didn't know your name. I was fresh out of a messy divorce. Needed a reset. Something with clean walls and no memories. The house was a little old, a 60s ranch style, but the foundation was solid, and the neighborhood had charm. I told myself it was exactly what I needed. The first week was uneventful. I unpacked, met a few neighbors, and got used to the sound of owls at night. It rained a lot. The kind of light drizzle that makes the streets look like oil paintings. Then I noticed something about the house across the street. It had no windows. Not boarded up, just, none. Not in the front, not on the side I could see from my driveway. A 2-story house, painted gray, with a porch and a black front door, but not a single visible window. At first I thought maybe it was under construction. Some kind of weird architectural project. But there were no signs. No contractors. No trucks. Just the house. Silent. Still. Like it had been forgotten. About a week after I moved in, I saw someone standing on that porch. A man, tall, wearing a tan coat. Just standing there, hands by his side, looking toward my house. Not waving. Not moving. Just, staring. I waved. No reaction. After maybe 20 seconds, he turned and walked back inside. Door closed behind him. No lights came on. That night, I asked my next-door neighbor, Jenna, if she knew anything about the place. Her face went pale. "You've seen him?" she asked. I nodded. "Tall guy? Tan coat?" She didn't answer right away. Then she said, "Don't look at that house after dark. Don't even face it. Just close your curtains." I laughed a little, thinking she was joking. She wasn't. She didn't smile. The next morning, the house was different. It had a window. Just one. On the second floor, facing my bedroom. It hadn't been there yesterday. I was sure of it. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept feeling like something was watching me. So around 2 a.m., I looked out. The window was lit. Not brightly. Just enough to glow faint yellow behind the curtains. There was movement. A silhouette, pacing. It stopped at the window. Faced me. Then the light went out. Things started to go missing in my house after that. Little things at first. Socks. Keys. Batteries. Then stranger stuff. My driver's license vanished. Found it in the freezer. A pair of scissors ended up under the bathroom sink, wrapped in a washcloth like someone had tried to hide them. I started locking my doors, all of them. Didn't matter. Every morning, the back door was unlocked. One afternoon, I was walking to my mailbox when I saw Jenna in her driveway. She looked shaken. "He came to my house last night," she whispered. "Who?" "The man in the coat. He knocked 3 times. I didn't answer, but he stood there for hours. I could hear him breathing through the door. I asked if she called the cops. "They don't come here anymore," she said. Then she handed me something wrapped in paper. It was an old Polaroid photo. Faded. Curled at the edges. It showed the man in the tan coat standing inside my house. Next to my couch. In the background, you could see me. Asleep. I asked her where she got it. She just said, "They always come back eventually," and walked inside. I tried to follow up later, but the house was dark. Curtains drawn. Never saw her again. I began losing time after that. I'd black out for an hour and wake up with bruises on my forearm. I found muddy footprints in my living room, too large to be mine. My phone had recordings I didn't remember making. Whispered things. Conversations with no voices. And then, the window multiplied. 2 windows. Then 4. Over the course of a week, the house across the street went from windowless to lined with them. All of them facing my house. Each night, the lights came on. Each night, the shadows grew clearer. And closer. One night, I had enough. I grabbed a flashlight and crossed the street around midnight. The air was heavy. No wind. No sound. When I stepped onto the porch, the door creaked open before I touched it. Inside, the house was hollow. No furniture. No lights. Just empty rooms, pale wallpaper, and the faint scent of soil. I walked to the staircase. At the top stood the man in the tan coat. His face was wrong, like a smudged drawing. His eyes too wide. His mouth slightly open, but no breath, no sound. Just waiting. I ran. Didn't look back. The next day, the house was gone. Gone. Not boarded up. Not demolished. Gone. An empty lot sat where it had stood, perfectly leveled. Not a brick, not a nail. Grass growing where the foundation should have been. The neighborhood acted like it had never existed. Even Jenna's house was empty. For sale. Vacant since 2017, the listing said. When I asked around, People looked at me like I was confused. "There's never been a house across from yours," one of them said. "That lot's been empty since the fire." I asked, "What fire?" They looked uncomfortable. Then they said, "You really should move." I did. I don't live near trees anymore. And I keep the curtains drawn at night. Because sometimes, in reflections or flickers on the TV screen, I still see it. The man in the tan coat. Standing just behind me. Watching. Waiting for me to forget him again. The town that wasn't on the map. In the summer of 2016, I took a road trip across the Midwest. It wasn't for fun, more of an escape. I'd just left a job, a relationship, and a lease all in the same week. Everything I owned was in the back seat of my old Jeep, and I didn't care where I was going as long as it was away. At some point on the third day, I found myself driving through Kansas. Flat, dry, horizon in every direction. I hadn't seen another car in over an hour when my gas light blinked on. Naturally. I pulled over and checked my phone. No service. Of course. That's when I saw the road sign. "Welcome to Darnley, EST 1879. No arrow, no mileage. Just, the name. Painted on a rusted metal plate that looked like it hadn't been touched in decades. But a little farther ahead, there was a dirt road cutting off the highway, leading into the trees. Figured it was worth a shot. I followed that road for maybe 15 minutes. The trees got thicker, the sky dimmer. And then, suddenly, the forest opened, and there it was. Darnley. A tiny town, almost like a film set. One main road. A church. A gas station. A general store. And maybe a dozen homes. All spaced perfectly apart. All too still. It was the quietest place I've ever been. No birds. No wind. Just the creak of my tires on the gravel. I pulled up to the gas station. The pumps were ancient, the kind with the rolling numbers, but one of them had a green, on, light blinking faintly. That's when the door opened, and a man stepped out. Mid-60s, overalls, wide-brimmed hat. He smiled, like he'd been expecting me. "You need fuel, son?" he asked. I nodded, already uneasy. As I filled up, he lit a cigarette and leaned against the wall. "You from around here?" he asked. "No. Just passing through." He gave a slow nod. "They all say that," he said. I went inside to pay. The register looked like it belonged in a museum. No credit card reader, just a tin cash box and a rotary phone on the counter. Behind the man, above the shelves, was a large black and white photo of the town square. But it looked wrong. The same buildings were there, but older. And instead of cars or people walking around, there were dozens of people standing in rows. Not smiling. Staring straight into the camera. Each one had a blindfold tied around their head. I asked about it. "Town tradition," he said. "We all wear M once a year. Keeps the eyes from seeing what they shouldn't." I asked him what that meant. He didn't answer. As I walked back to my car, I noticed something else: no power lines. None running into the homes, the store, or the gas station. No satellite dishes. No phone poles. Nothing. And yet, the lights were on. Faintly. Buzzing like an old fridge. I planned to keep driving. Just head out and find a real motel somewhere. But the man had other ideas. "You shouldn't leave tonight," he said, stepping back onto the porch. "Roads not safe after dark." "I'll take my chances," I said. He paused, then added, "There's no road after dark." And when I looked past the station, back the way I came, I realized something horrifying. The road was gone. Just trees. Endless, thick woods. Like I'd never driven through them at all. I stayed that night at the town inn. It wasn't a choice, really. My Jeep wouldn't start. Not even a click. The woman who ran the place, Mrs. Adley, greeted me with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Room 2 was ready," she said. "Already prepared." The sheets were crisp. The lamp worked. But there was a faint hum in the walls. A low frequency, like something alive. At midnight, the bell rang from the church. 12 slow chimes. Then silence. Then, the knocking started. Every door in the hallway. 3 knocks. Then the next. And the next. When it reached mine, it stopped. I didn't sleep. The next morning, everything looked the same. But off. The people weren't speaking. They just moved about, doing chores, sweeping, planting, walking from house to house. With blank expressions. I went to the general store and asked a young man how long he'd lived here. He blinked at me and said, "We've always been here." Then he turned and walked away. I was done. I went to the church, only tall building in town. Thought maybe they had a phone. Maybe someone would help. Inside, it was empty. Wooden pews. Thick stained glass. And at the altar, something like a shrine. Candles burned low around a figure carved from wood and bone. Something inhuman, long, stretched limbs and a face made of hands. Above it was a plaque. "Do not let it see you." There was a blindfold nailed beneath the words. I didn't wait around. When I got back to the Jeep, it was running. Engine humming. Full tank. Like nothing had ever happened. The man from the gas station stood near the trees, watching. "You'll come back," he said. I didn't answer. I just drove. Back on the highway, I finally got a signal. GPS showed nothing, just a gray patch where the town had been. I reported it later. Gave them the road, the sign, the directions. There was no record of a Darnley, Kansas. Not in the county archives. Not in the state registry. Not even in the old maps. Just, nothing. But here's the thing. Every year since, on the anniversary of that day, I get a letter. No return address. Inside is a photo. Different each time. Always of me, standing in a place I don't remember being. Eyes closed. And behind me, just barely visible in the blur of the background, is the same man in the overalls. Smiling. Waiting.